Farmer's son is scolded by principal. But the next day a limousine stops at the school. The 6th grade classroom at Ridgeview Academy fell completely silent when Principal Richard Thompson held up Tyler's composition notebook between his fingers with disdain, as if gripping something contaminated. The 12-year-old boy, the son of small rural farmers from the countryside of Wisconsin, shrank in his seat as his essay about "A Day in My Life" was ridiculed in front of all his classmates. Take a look, children. This is a perfect example of how not to write an essay, the principal announced, adjusting his thin-framed glasses while pointing at Tyler. I woke up early to help my dad with the cow before catching the bus to school. Honestly, Tyler Anderson, you're in 6th grade and still don't know cows is plural? And this country grammar has no place in an institution like ours. Soft laughter echoed through the room as Tyler's face burned with shame. He had only transferred to Ridgeview Academy 2 weeks earlier, when his parents, Frank and Sarah Anderson, decided he needed a better education than what was offered at the small rural school in Hopeville, the tiny town near their family's Sunrise Valley Farm. Even though he had to wake up 2 hours earlier to catch the bus to Pleasant Grove, where the private school was located, his parents insisted education was the only path to a better future. "Sir, I can rewrite it," Tyler murmured almost inaudibly, gripping the hem of his faded green hoodie. "Rewrite?" Richard scoffed. "Maybe we should send you back to a rural school where that kind of language is acceptable. We're shaping future leaders here, not cattle hands." Mrs. Jennifer, a middle-aged teacher who had been watching uncomfortably, finally intervened. "Principal, I think we've made the point. May we continue with the lesson?" Richard tossed the notebook onto Tyler's desk with a sharp motion. "Certainly, Mrs. Jennifer, just ensuring our standards are upheld." He turned to Tyler one last time. "I suggest you reconsider your priorities, young man. The cows can wait. Your education can't." As the principal strode out of the classroom with firm steps, Tyler kept his eyes fixed on his notebook, fighting back the tears threatening to fall. Around him, some classmates still snickered quietly, while others avoided looking at him, embarrassed by the public humiliation they had just witnessed. The morning dragged on like an eternity. At recess, Tyler chose to stay alone, hiding behind the library building where no one could see the tears he finally let fall. It wasn't just the humiliation that hurt. It was knowing the sacrifices his parents made to keep him in that school. Every penny of tuition represented hours of backbreaking work on the farm, which had struggled to stay productive during the severe drought that had plagued the region for nearly 2 years. When classes ended, Tyler walked with his head down to the bus stop, the weight of the world on his shoulders. He had to wait nearly half an hour for the only bus that passed near his farm. He sat on the bench, hugging his backpack to his chest, lost in thought. "Are you all right, young man?" A gentle voice snapped him out of his daze. Beside him, an elderly woman with white hair pulled into an elegant bun watched him with kind eyes. She must have been around 70, dressed in simple but well-made clothes, carrying a worn leather bag that seemed to hold several books. "Yes, ma'am, I'm fine," he replied automatically, wiping his face to hide any trace of tears. "You know, when someone says they're fine with that expression, it usually means the exact opposite," the woman remarked with a kind smile, handing him a perfectly pressed white handkerchief. "Here, you can keep it." Tyler hesitated for a moment before accepting it. "Thank you, ma'am. Eleanor Williams. I was a teacher for over 40 years before retiring, and I can still recognize when a student is struggling." She gestured to his uniform. "Ridgeview Academy, isn't it? I know that place well." Something in her kindness made Tyler's defenses begin to crumble. Before he realized it, he was telling her about the humiliation he'd faced that morning, how out of place he felt at his new school, and how hard his parents were working to pay tuition despite the drought affecting their farm's production. "Sunrise Valley Farm in Hopeville?" Mrs. Williams asked with genuine interest. "I know that area. Good land, but it suffers from long dry spells. What do you grow there?" "Mostly corn, and we have a few dairy cows, but it's been tough with the lack of rain. My dad says if it doesn't rain soon, we'll have to sell part of the land." The woman nodded thoughtfully. "You know, Tyler, I also grew up on a farm, And when I came to study in the city, I went through the same struggles as you. My classmates laughed at my accent, the way I spoke. She smiled nostalgically. But that very knowledge of the land later became my greatest strength. Tyler's bus was approaching, and he reluctantly stood. I should go, Mrs. Williams. It was nice meeting you. Wait a moment. She opened her purse and took out a card, handing it to him. If you need help with your studies, call me. Maybe I can help with your essays. Don't let people who don't understand the value of the practical knowledge you bring from the farm get you down. Tyler took the card, thanked her again, and boarded the bus. The whole ride home he kept thinking about the unexpected kindness of that woman and her words of encouragement. He considered calling her, but pride held him back. After all, he barely knew her, and admitting he needed help felt like confessing weakness. When he got home, he found his parents in the kitchen, speaking in hushed, worried voices. He paused before entering, unintentionally overhearing. "Frank, if we don't get the loan by the end of the month, we'll have to sell the south lot," his mother Sarah said wearily. "And if we sell that part, how will we manage production next year? Not to mention Tyler's tuition. It'll work out, Sarah. It always does. The Rural Credit Union promised to prioritize our case, and Tyler needs that school. It's his chance for a better life than ours." Tyler felt a lump in his throat. His grades were average at best, and now, after the incident with the principal, he feared his performance would only get worse. Was he wasting his parents' sacrifice? That night, lying in bed, he made a decision. He took Mrs. Williams' card and stared at the phone number printed in elegant letters. Tomorrow after school he'd call her. He couldn't afford to fail, not when his parents were risking everything for his education. The next day, Tyler tried to go unnoticed at school. He sat in the back of the classroom, avoided raising his hand even when he knew the answers, and kept his eyes fixed on his notebook. At lunch, some classmates passed by him in the courtyard, mocking his rural accent and laughing. "Hey, farmer, watch out. Don't dirty the school floors with cow manure," one of them taunted, sparking a wave of laughter. Tyler pretended not to hear, but each word felt like a small stab to his chest. Would he ever be accepted there? After class, he walked resolutely to the payphone near the bus stop. With trembling hands, he dialed the number from Mrs. Eleanor's card. "Hello," her gentle voice answered after 3 rings. "Mrs. Eleanor, it's Tyler from the bus stop, remember?" "Of course I remember, young man. It's so good to hear your voice. How was your day?" Tyler hesitated for a moment. "Not great. I'm still having trouble with the essays and with the other students." "I see." There was a pause on the other end. "Would you like to meet and talk about it? We could start some tutoring sessions if you'd like." "You'd do that, but I can't afford private lessons." A soft laugh came through the phone. "Tyler, not everything in life has a price. Sometimes helping someone is reward enough. How about tomorrow after your class? I can meet you." At the same bus stop, Tyler felt a wave of relief and gratitude. "Thank you so much, Mrs. Eleanor. I'll be there." In the days that followed, Tyler began meeting Mrs. Eleanor regularly. At first, he didn't tell his parents about the tutoring, afraid they'd worry even more about his school situation. She was a patient and wise teacher. Instead of just correcting his grammar mistakes, she taught him to value his own experiences and turn them into compelling stories. "Tyler, what you see as a disadvantage might be your greatest strength," she explained during one of their sessions at a small cafe near the school. "Your classmates know shopping malls and video games. You know the growth cycle of corn, can tell when a cow is about to give birth, understand the signs of changing weather. That's real, practical, valuable knowledge." Little by little, Tyler gained confidence. His essays improved significantly, and some teachers began noticing the change. But Principal Richard still treated him with disdain, as if he'd already made up his mind about the farm boy. One afternoon during a study session, Tyler noticed Mrs. Eleanor seemed particularly thoughtful. "Is something wrong, Mrs. Eleanor?" She smiled, a mix of nostalgia and a hint of sadness in her expression. "No, my dear, just thinking about how life goes in circles. You know, I've known Principal Richard for a very long time." Tyler nearly choked on his juice. You know the principal? Yes. In fact, I was his teacher when he was just a boy. She opened her bag and pulled out a yellowed envelope. Richard didn't come from a privileged family, you know. His father was a bricklayer and his mother took in laundry. He earned every opportunity through hard work and determination. She slid a few sheets of paper toward Tyler. These are essays he wrote when he was about your age. I kept some as mementos of my special students. Tyler looked at the papers in disbelief. The handwriting was obviously childish, but unmistakably similar to the elegant script the principal now displayed. And to his complete surprise, the text was full of grammar mistakes, crossed out words, and red corrections. But how? He always acts like he's perfect. Mrs. Eleanor finished with a sigh. Richard worked hard to overcome his beginnings. He studied, dedicated himself, earned scholarships, graduated with honors. But in the process, I think he forgot where he came from. Sometimes those who fight hardest to leave their past behind are the harshest on those still at the start of their journey. Tyler fell silent, absorbing the revelation. It was hard to imagine the strict Principal Richard as an insecure boy, struggling with grammar and writing. What happened to make him change so much? Mrs. Eleanor carefully placed the essays back into the envelope. Life, Tyler. Sometimes when we fight too hard to be accepted in a world that rejects us, we end up becoming harsher than those who judged us. But I hold on to hope that one day Richard will reconnect with his roots and remember his own story. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. In the following weeks, Tyler kept meeting with Mrs. Eleanor and improving his school performance. At home, he noticed his parents' growing concern about the farm's financial situation. The drought persisted, and the main well-supplying irrigation was running lower and lower. His father spent sleepless nights crunching numbers, trying to find a way to keep production going without selling more land. One evening during dinner, Tyler gathered the courage to speak up. "Dad, what if we used a different irrigation system? Like that drip system we saw at last year's agricultural fair." Frank looked at his son with a mix of affection and exhaustion. "Son, those systems are too expensive for small farmers like us, and we'd need specialized technical assistance to implement them." "But what if we adapted it?" Tyler insisted, remembering an article Mrs. Eleanor had shown him about alternative irrigation techniques. "I read in an article that some farmers in the Northeast are using PET bottles and regular hoses to make homemade systems that save up to 60% of water." His father looked at him with renewed curiosity. "Where did you read that, Tyler?" My tutor showed me," he finally admitted, revealing his lessons with Mrs. Eleanor to his parents. Instead of the scolding he expected for hiding the lessons, he saw his parents exchange proud glances. "A tutor?" his mother asked. "And how are you paying for that?" "She doesn't charge anything, Mum. She says she enjoys teaching me." Sarah and Frank looked at each other again, this time with a mix of relief and concern. "Tyler, that's very kind of her, but we can't accept her giving free lessons," his father said. "We need to meet her and thank her properly." "Dad, she really doesn't mind and she's helped me so much. My grades are improving and—" He was interrupted by his mother's warm smile. "We've noticed, son, and we're very proud. But still, we'd like to meet this woman who's doing so much for our boy." Tyler agreed, relieved to finally share his secret with his parents, and secretly proud that he could contribute in some way to solving the farm's problems with the knowledge he was gaining. At school, things weren't as positive. Though his grades had improved significantly, the hostility from some classmates and the coldness from Principal Richard remained unchanged. The final straw came when the science teacher announced a special project. "Class, this semester we'll have the Sustainable Science Fair. Each of you must develop a project related to environmental sustainability and present it in 2 months. The best projects will be selected to represent our school at the state fair." A murmur of excitement spread through the room. Tyler felt a spark of enthusiasm. This was a topic he knew well. Maybe he could develop something related to the alternative irrigation techniques he'd been studying with Mrs. Eleanor and testing experimentally in a small plot on the farm. After class, he approached the science teacher to share his idea. "Professor Catherine, I was thinking of doing my project on alternative irrigation systems for small rural farmers during droughts." Professor Catherine, a young and enthusiastic woman, smiled encouragingly. "That sounds like an excellent idea, Tyler. It's a very relevant topic, especially for our region. Do you already have a specific plan in mind?" Tyler excitedly explained the system he was testing at home, using recycled materials and adapted techniques. The professor listened attentively, asking pertinent questions and offering suggestions. "This is very promising, Tyler. I'd love to see your project when it's more developed." For the first time since arriving at that school, Tyler felt he truly had something valuable to offer. He decided to dedicate himself fully to the project, determined to prove his worth. Over the following weeks, he divided his time between regular classes, meetings with Mrs. Eleanor, and developing the irrigation system on the farm. His father, initially skeptical, was impressed by the preliminary results in the small experimental plot. The technique really used much less water and seemed effective at keeping the plants healthy, even with rationing. "Son, this is actually working," remarked Frank, observing the thriving tomato plants in the experimental plot. "If we expand it, we might be able to keep at least the garden productive during this dry spell." Tyler's chest swelled with pride. Maybe his classes at Ridgeview Academy, combined with the practical knowledge from the farm and Mrs. Eleanor's guidance, could really make a difference for his family. When the day came to submit the preliminary project for the Sustainable Science Fair, Tyler was confident. He had prepared a detailed report with photos of the system implemented on the farm, data on water savings, and statistics on plant productivity. Mrs. Eleanor had reviewed all the material, ensuring the writing was clear and free of grammatical errors. He handed the project to Professor Catherine, who accepted it with an encouraging smile. But his confidence was shaken when, in the hallway, he heard laughter from a group of classmates. "Did you see the Hicks project?" mocked Brandon, one of the most popular boys in the class. "He thinks he's going to win by showing how to water little plants with old bottles." "Probably learned it from the cows," laughed another classmate, sparking more laughter. Tyler's face burned, but he kept walking, pretending not to hear. Why couldn't they see the practical value of what he was proposing? Why was his rural background such a target for mockery? 2 days later, Professor Catherine returned the preliminary projects with comments. As she handed them back, she made brief observations about each one. When it was Tyler's turn, her smile was radiant. "Tyler, your project is absolutely exceptional. The practical approach, the preliminary data, the social relevance, I'm truly impressed." A murmur of surprise spread through the classroom. Brandon, sitting 2 desks ahead, rolled his eyes dramatically. "Professor, with all due respect, but irrigation with plastic bottles, isn't that a bit primitive?" he asked loudly, provoking snickers. Professor Catherine adjusted her glasses, looking seriously at Brandon. "True innovation, Brandon, often lies in simplicity and accessibility. Tyler's project addresses a real problem with a viable solution for small farmers. Not all technology needs chips and buttons to be valuable." Tyler felt a wave of gratitude for the professor's defense. Maybe finally he was starting to find his place at that school. His joy, however, was short-lived. At the end of that same week, all the students were called to the auditorium for a special announcement from Principal Richard Thompson. "Dear students," he began, his authoritative voice echoing through the silent room, "I am pleased to announce that Ridgeview Academy has been invited to send 3 projects to the State Sustainable Science Fair. This is a great honor and an opportunity to showcase the excellence of our institution." A murmur of excitement spread through the auditorium. The principal raised his hand, calling for silence. "The projects selected to represent our school are Portable Solar Energy by Brandon Mitchell, Urban Composting by Olivia Carter, and Water Purification with Nanotechnology by Ethan Roberts." Tyler felt as if he had been punched in the gut. His project, which Ms. Catherine had praised so enthusiastically, had not been chosen. He looked at the teacher, seated in the front. Rowan noticed she seemed just as surprised as he was, furrowing her brow and quickly flipping through some papers she had with her. After the announcement, Ms. Catherine approached him in the hallway. Tyler, I don't understand what happened. Your project was among the best I reviewed. I'll speak with the principal to clarify the selection criteria. You don't have to, Ms. Catherine, Tyler replied, his voice tight. I think I already know the criteria. That afternoon, his meeting with Mrs. Eleanor was marked by discouragement. He told her about his project being excluded and how he felt undervalued at school, no matter how hard he tried. Maybe my father is wrong. Maybe that school isn't for me. Mrs. Eleanor listened carefully, her face a mix of understanding and determination. Tyler, remember when we talked about Principal Richard's roots? About how he seems to want to forget where he came from? The boy nodded silently. Sometimes people need a reminder of their original values. She seemed to be speaking more to herself than to him. And maybe it's time for Richard to receive that reminder. What do you mean, Mrs. Eleanor? The woman smiled enigmatically. Trust me, Tyler. Keep working on your project. Something tells me this story isn't over yet. The next day, during lunch, Tyler was called to the school office. With a racing heart, fearing some new trouble, he made his way there. The secretary, a middle-aged woman named Margaret, greeted him with a discreet smile. Tyler, there's some mail for you, she said, handing him an official envelope bearing the seal of the State Department of Education. Confused, he opened it right there. Inside was a formal letter inviting him to present his project, Sustainable Irrigation System for Small Farmers, at the State Science Fair as an independent representative, nominated by the State Scientific Commission. But how? He stammered, barely believing what he was reading. Secretary Margaret smiled more openly. Your project really is excellent, Tyler. Ms. Catherine was so impressed that she sent a copy directly to the State Commission as an independent submission, and it seems they agreed with her. Tyler looked at her, gratitude and confusion mixing on his face. Ms. Catherine did that, but the principal... What the principal doesn't know won't hurt him, Margaret replied with a conspiratorial wink. Just keep this between us for now, okay? Congratulations, Tyler. You deserve this opportunity. He left the office feeling both light and apprehensive. How would he tell his parents? How would he properly prepare for the fair without the school's official support? And most importantly, what would happen when Principal Richard found out? He shared the news with Mrs. Eleanor that same afternoon. The woman listened intently and, to Tyler's surprise, didn't seem shocked at all. This is wonderful, Tyler, she exclaimed, her eyes shining. I knew your project had real merit. Now we need to prepare properly for the presentation. You'll have to be flawless. But Mrs. Eleanor, I don't have the resources to set up a booth like the other students with those colorful displays. Professional models? She shook her head, dismissing his concern with an elegant wave of her hand. Don't worry about that. What matters is the content, the innovation, the practicality of your solution, and I'm sure we can make your presentation visually appealing without spending a fortune. Leave that to me. In the weeks that followed, Tyler divided his time between his regular studies, work on the farm, and preparing for the fair. Mrs. Eleanor helped him refine his presentation, rehearsing answers to potential questions and improving the quality of his visual materials. To his surprise, she showed remarkable knowledge about sustainable farming techniques and irrigation processes. You really know a lot about this, Mrs. Eleanor, Tyler remarked during one of their meetings. She smiled, a special gleam in her eyes. Let's just say I have some experience in the field. What's important now is that you're ready to shine at that fair. At home, when he finally told his parents about his project being selected for the state fair, he received a reaction he hadn't expected. Instead of worrying about costs or questioning how he'd gotten the nomination, he saw tears of pride in their eyes. "My son, this is amazing," his mother exclaimed, hugging him tightly. "We always knew you were special, representing our farm at a state fair." His father shook his head in awe. "Who would have thought? The irrigation system is really working well in the experimental plot. We're already thinking of expanding it to a larger area." The week of the state fair finally arrived. The night before the big day, Tyler couldn't sleep, anxiety and excitement churning in his stomach. What would it be like facing all those students from prestigious schools with their sophisticated projects? What if his homemade irrigation system was ridiculed again? In the morning, he dressed carefully, wearing the only dress shirt he owned, a birthday gift from the previous year. It was a little short in the sleeves, but it was the best he had. His father had cleaned and polished the black shoes he only wore on special occasions, and his mother had pressed his newest jeans until they were wrinkle-free. "You look handsome, son," Sarah said, her eyes moist with emotion. "You're going to do great at that fair." Frank cleared his throat, masking his own emotion. "Remember, Tyler, you know this subject better than any of those city boys. Speak confidently about what you know." "Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Mum." He hugged them both, feeling strengthened by their unconditional support. "I just wish I could go with you," Sarah sighed. "But with your dad needing to stay at the farm for the milk delivery, and me having to meet with the cooperative's technician." "Don't worry. I'm going with Mrs. Eleanor. She promised to meet me there." His parents exchanged concerned glances. "Tyler, we still don't know this woman." "Are you sure we can trust her?" his father asked. "Absolutely, Dad. She's been like a guardian angel to me." After a few more minutes of advice and hugs, Tyler left to catch the bus that would take him to the exhibition center where the fair was being held. He carried a backpack with his presentation materials and a small model of the irrigation system made from recycled materials, carefully packed in a cardboard box. He arrived at the designated spot nearly an hour early, just as Mrs. Eleanor had recommended. The vast pavilion was already buzzing with activity, students and teachers setting up their booths, organizing materials, putting final touches on impressive experiments and models. Tyler felt his stomach drop. Everyone seemed so professional, so well prepared. He headed to the space designated for his project, a small booth in row E, number 23. It was an inconspicuous location, far from the main entrance where the judges and visitors would enter. He began setting up his modest materials, trying to ignore the curious and occasionally disdainful glances from other participants. To his right, a team of 3 uniformed students assembled a complex solar energy system with parts that looked like they came from a high-tech lab. To his left, 2 girls adjusted a sophisticated structure simulating an artificial aquatic ecosystem. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. "Where is Mrs. Eleanor?" he wondered, checking his watch. For the 3rd time in just a few minutes. The official opening of the fair was in 40 minutes, and she had promised to arrive early to help him with the final details. "So, you're Tyler with the Sustainable Irrigation Project?" A woman's voice interrupted his thoughts. Turning, he saw a woman around 50, dressed in an elegant suit and wearing a badge identifying her as Dr. Barbara Johnson, coordinator of the Scientific Commission. Yes, ma'am," he stammered nervously. The woman smiled, eyeing his small booth and the modest but carefully assembled model. "Your project caught quite a bit of attention during the selection phase. We're curious to see your presentation." "Thank you, ma'am." Tyler felt his face burn with embarrassment as he compared his simple setup to the sophisticated projects around him. At that moment, a commotion at the pavilion's main entrance drew everyone's attention. A sleek black limousine had pulled up in front of the door, and event security hurried to clear a path through the crowd of onlookers that had immediately gathered. "Ah, it seems she's arrived," Dr. Barbara remarked with a knowing smile. "Good luck, Tyler. I'll be in the audience during your presentation." Before he could ask who she meant, the coordinator had already walked away, heading toward the main entrance. Tyler craned his neck, trying to see what was causing such a stir. "Someone important? A politician or famous scientist here to honor the event?" His heart nearly stopped when he saw who stepped out of the limousine. Mrs. Eleanor, elegantly dressed in a navy blue suit and wearing a delicate pearl necklace. Beside her, a man in a suit carried an executive briefcase and seemed to be following her instructions attentively. Tyler gaped as Mrs. Eleanor was greeted with deference by the event organizers, including Dr. Barbara, who embraced her warmly. Who was this woman he'd met at the bus stop? A few minutes later, to his even greater surprise, Mrs. Eleanor approached his booth, followed by a small entourage of people who looked important, judging by their badges and formal attire. "Tyler, my dear, sorry for the delay." She hugged him affectionately as if they were old friends meeting casually rather than in the middle of a prestigious science fair. "I see you've already started setting up." "Excellent. Mrs. Eleanor, He didn't know what to say. "Was that you in the limousine?" She smiled, her eyes twinkling with amusement and warmth. "Oh, that. Just a little overindulgence from Thomas, my assistant. He insists on unnecessary formalities." She turned to the suited man beside her. "Thomas, please bring the supplementary materials to Tyler's booth." The man nodded respectfully and signaled to two other assistants, who immediately began unloading boxes from a cart Tyler hadn't noticed before. "Supplementary materials?" Tyler asked, confused. "Just some visual elements to enhance your presentation, dear. Nothing that will overshadow your original work, I promise." Mrs. Eleanor supervised as the assistants opened the boxes, revealing professionally printed high-resolution panels, a scale model of the irrigation system far more sophisticated than his homemade mock-up, and even a small LCD monitor to display demonstration videos. Within minutes, his modest booth had transformed into a high-level presentation without losing the original essence of his project. The homemade mock-up he'd brought wasn't discarded, but strategically positioned as the initial prototype, beside the more elaborate model. "Mrs. Eleanor, I don't understand. How did you get all this, and why are they treating you like someone important?" Tyler finally managed to ask when the assistant stepped away to fetch more equipment. The woman smiled, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "Tyler, there are many things I haven't had the chance to tell you yet. Let's just say that after retiring as a teacher, I dedicated myself to other areas." She paused, studying his bewildered expression. "I'm the founder of the Williams Institute for Sustainable Agricultural Research. We develop technologies for small and mid-sized producers, with a special focus on regions affected by prolonged droughts." Tyler's jaw dropped. "You're a scientist?" "Among other things," she smiled again. "What matters is that your project has tremendous potential. The approach you developed, using accessible materials and adaptable techniques for small farmers, is exactly the kind of innovation we need to promote. In fact," she lowered her voice, leaning closer, "I've already begun implementing a larger-scale test at your farm." "What do you mean?" "Didn't your father tell you? The technician from the credit union that your mother mentioned this morning? He's one of my institute's engineers. We're expanding your experimental system to 1/2 acre as a pilot project." Tyler felt like the world was spinning around him. Nothing made sense, yet everything was starting to click. The technical conversations they'd had, Mrs. Eleanor's deep knowledge of sustainable agriculture, her specific interest in his project. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Mrs. Eleanor's face grew more serious. "I wanted to know you, Tyler, the real you, without the influence of my name or position. I wanted to see your potential flourish naturally." Her eyes softened. "And you've exceeded all my expectations." Before they could continue, a commotion at the pavilion entrance drew everyone's attention again. Tyler turned to see what had caused the new stir. His heart raced when he recognized Principal Richard, accompanied by Mrs. Catherine and a group of Ridgeview Academy students, the 3 whose projects had been officially selected. They seemed to have just arrived and were being directed to their respective booths in the main section near the entrance. "What now?" Tyler murmured, feeling panic rise. The principal would surely see him, and then he'd know his project had been submitted independently. What would happen next? Would he be expelled? Mrs. Eleanor followed his gaze, and upon seeing Principal Richard, her face lit up with a smile Tyler couldn't decipher. A mix of nostalgia, determination, and perhaps anticipation. "Perfect timing," she remarked, almost to herself. Then, turning to Tyler, "Don't worry, my dear, everything will work out for the best. Trust me." The opening ceremony of the fair was about to begin. Participants were called to their booths for the judges' initial walkthrough, who would conduct a first round of evaluations before the formal presentations. Mrs. Eleanor gently squeezed Tyler's shoulder in an encouraging gesture. "I'll let you prepare now. I'll be in the audience during your presentation. Remember everything we practiced. You know this project better than anyone." She smiled once more. "And as for Principal Richard, let me handle that." Before he could ask what she meant, Mrs. Eleanor was already walking away, heading toward the group of judges and organizers gathered near the main stage. Tyler took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. He looked around his now transformed booth and felt a wave of gratitude for everything Mrs. Eleanor had done for him, even without fully understanding her motives. Regardless of what happened with Principal Richard, he was determined to give the best presentation possible. The morning passed in a whirlwind of activity. Judges visited his booth in small groups, asking detailed questions about the irrigation system, its practical implementation, costs, efficiency, and potential for expansion. To his surprise, Tyler found himself answering confidently, drawing on the hands-on knowledge he'd gained at the farm and the technical information Mrs. Eleanor had taught him. Some judges seemed genuinely impressed by the simplicity and effectiveness of his proposed solution. One, a gray-haired man who introduced himself as a water resources specialist, spent nearly 20 minutes discussing technical details and possible improvements. "Young man, you show a remarkable understanding of the relationship between accessible technology and real agricultural needs," he commented, jotting notes on his clipboard. "It's refreshing to see a project that doesn't require expensive equipment or specialized knowledge to implement." By midday, during a lunch break, Tyler finally spotted Principal Richard walking through the pavilion, inspecting the various booths with a critical expression. His heart raced when he noticed the principal approaching his section. Inevitably, the moment arrived. Principal Richard stopped in front of his booth, his eyes widening in recognition before narrowing in disapproval. "Tyler Anderson? How are you doing here?" Tyler swallowed hard, fighting the urge to shrink back or look away. "Good afternoon, Principal. My project was selected for the fair as an independent submission." "Independent submission?" the principal repeated, his tone wavering between disbelief and irritation. "And who authorized this? How dare you use Ridgeview Academy's name without my express permission?" "I didn't use the school's name, sir. My project is registered as an individual initiative representing only myself." The principal scrutinized the booth with a critical eye, taking in the professional panels, the sophisticated model, the monitor displaying statistical data. "And where did all this material come from? I don't believe a student of your circumstances could afford this." There was a veiled accusation in his voice that made Tyler's blood boil. He was about to respond when a familiar voice intervened. "The materials were provided by the Williams Institute, Richard, as part of our policy to support young talent." Mrs. Eleanor had approached quietly, positioning herself beside Tyler. Principal Richard turned to her, initially annoyed by the interruption. Then his face visibly paled as he recognized her. "Professor Eleanor?" "Hello, Richard, it's been a while." She smiled serenely. "You've grown so much since we last met. In every way, it seems." The principal looked completely unsettled, his gaze shifting between Mrs. Eleanor and Tyler. "Do you two know each other?" he finally managed to ask. "Oh yes, Tyler and I have been working together these past few weeks. A brilliant young man, don't you think? He reminds me so much of you, actually, at that age." A deep flush spread across the principal's face as he struggled to regain his composure. "I didn't know you were still active in academia. There's much you don't know about me, Richard." Mrs. Eleanor's tone remained gentle, but there was something in her eyes that hinted at sadness. "Just as there seems to be much you've forgotten." At that moment, an announcement came over the loudspeaker, calling everyone to the start of the main presentations. Principal Richard seemed relieved by the interruption. "If you'll excuse me, I need to attend." "To our official students." "Of course, Richard." Mrs. Eleanor nodded politely. "But wouldn't you like to watch Tyler's presentation later? I'm sure you'd be impressed." The principal hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "I'll see what I can do." "Excuse me." After his hurried exit, Tyler turned to Mrs. Eleanor, puzzled. "What was that about? You and the principal?" "As I've told you, I was his teacher many years ago." She sighed softly. "Richard was a brilliant student, with a thirst for knowledge much like yours. But life isn't always kind to us, and sometimes people build walls around their hearts to protect themselves." The presentations began promptly at 2 in the afternoon. Projects were presented in alphabetical order by category, and Tyler's, classified under Water Resources and Sustainability, would be one of the last. This gave him time to watch a few other presentations and observe how the other students handled themselves before the judges and audience. He noticed Principal Richard attentively watching Ridgeview Academy's students, applauding enthusiastically and taking photos, presumably for the school's social media. Brandon, in particular, seemed to be his favorite, receiving effusive praise after his presentation on portable solar energy. Finally, it was Tyler's turn. His name was announced as an independent presenter, with no mention of Ridgeview Academy. As he walked to the makeshift stage for his demonstration, he noticed Mrs. Eleanor had discreetly positioned herself in the front row of the audience, alongside Dr. Barbara and other members of the organizing committee. To his surprise, he also saw Principal Richard still in the room, standing at the back with an unreadable expression. Mrs. Catherine was beside him and gave an encouraging smile when their eyes met. Taking a deep breath, Tyler began his presentation, explaining the issue of water scarcity for small rural farmers and how high-tech solutions were often beyond their financial reach. He demonstrated how his adapted drip irrigation system, using recyclable and low-cost materials, could reduce water consumption by up to 60%, while maintaining or even increasing productivity. As he spoke, his voice grew more confident. This was his world, his knowledge. He wasn't just repeating theories from textbooks, but sharing lived experiences, real challenges faced by his family and thousands like them. He presented concrete data collected from the experimental plot at Sunrise Valley Farm, comparing plant growth under traditional irrigation versus his adapted system. The photos and graphs on the screen clearly showed the difference: healthier plants using significantly less water. The most important aspect of this project, he concluded firmly, isn't just its technical effectiveness, but its accessibility. Any small-scale farmer can implement it with materials costing less than $20 for an initial area of 100 square meters. And the knowledge needed for installation and maintenance doesn't require specialized training, just basic instructions that can easily be shared among rural communities. When he finished his presentation, there was a moment of silence followed by a wave of enthusiastic applause. Several jurors quickly jotted down notes on their clipboards, while others exchanged approving glances. During the Q&A session, Tyler answered with clarity and confidence, even to the most technical questions. At one point, one of the jurors asked, "Has this system been tested on a larger scale than the experimental plot?" Tyler hesitated for a moment, unsure how much he should reveal. He glanced at Mrs. Eleanor, who gave him a subtle nod. "Yes, sir. In fact, we're implementing a pilot project on half an acre at my family's farm with technical support from the Williams Institute for Sustainable Agricultural Research. The preliminary results have been extremely promising." A murmur rippled through the audience. The name of the Williams Institute clearly made an impression. More technical questions followed, and for each one, Tyler had a well-founded answer. When the session ended and he stepped off the stage, Mrs. Eleanor greeted him with a warm hug. "Extraordinary, Tyler. You were simply brilliant." "Thank you, Mrs. Eleanor, for everything." He smiled, feeling genuinely proud of himself for the first time in a long while. The awards ceremony would take place at the end of the day, after all presentations. While waiting, Tyler was approached by several other participants interested in the details of his project. Some teachers from other schools also came to talk, asking technical questions and praising the practicality of his solution. To his surprise, even Brandon, the popular student from Ridgeview Academy, approached with less arrogance than usual. "Hey, Tyler, your presentation was cool. I didn't think that homemade system could work so well." "Thanks, Brandon. Your solar energy project is really interesting too." The boy seemed genuinely surprised by the compliment, as if he expected hostility. "Yeah, well, maybe we could swap ideas sometime. I've been thinking about adapting my solar charger for rural areas without electricity." "That'd be great," Tyler replied, sensing that maybe, just maybe, some barriers were starting to come down. When the awards ceremony finally began, all participants gathered in the main auditorium. Tyler sat near Mrs. Eleanor, his heart racing. He didn't actually expect to win. Just making it this far and delivering a respected presentation was already a huge victory. Dr. Barbara took the stage to announce the winners, starting with honorable mentions and special categories. Brandon's project received an honorable mention for technological innovation, and the boy walked up to the stage, visibly proud to accept his certificate. Finally, it was time to announce the top 3 winners, who would receive not just trophies, but also scholarships and opportunities to further develop their projects. In third place, Dr. Barbara announced, the project Automated Urban Composting by Olivia Carter from St. Francis Academy. Enthusiastic applause filled the auditorium as a girl around 15 years old stepped up to receive her award. In second place, the doctor continued after a brief dramatic pause, the project Biotechnological Purification of Contaminated Water by Ryan Stevens from the State Technical Institute. More applause erupted as a tall young man with glasses accepted his trophy with a shy smile. Tyler took a deep breath, preparing himself for the announcement of the grand winner. Who would it be? Surely one of the sophisticated projects from renowned schools. And the grand winner of this year's State Sustainable Science Fair, Dr. Barbara paused dramatically, smiling at the eager audience, with a project that combines simplicity, effectiveness, and real social impact. Sustainable Irrigation System for Small Farmers by Tyler Anderson. For a moment, Tyler stood frozen, unable to process what he'd just heard. Beside him, Mrs. Eleanor beamed, giving him a gentle nudge. "Go on, my dear, you've earned it." With hesitant steps, Tyler made his way to the stage, where Dr. Barbara waited with a warm smile and an impressive trophy shaped like a stylized leaf. The audience cheered enthusiastically, and he could see some of the technical judges nodding in approval. "Congratulations, Tyler," Dr. Barbara said, handing him the trophy and an envelope. "Your practical and accessible approach to a real problem faced by thousands of small farmers unanimously impressed our panel of judges. This is the kind of science that makes a tangible difference in the world." Microphones from local press outlets stretched toward him, and camera flashes went off as he held the trophy, dazed. "Any words about your victory, Tyler?" a reporter asked. Tyler swallowed hard, searching for words. His gaze swept the crowd and landed on Mrs. Eleanor, who nodded encouragingly. He also spotted Mrs. Catherine, smiling and clapping enthusiastically. And to his surprise, Principal Richard Thompson was there at the back of the auditorium, wearing a complicated expression, some mix of surprise, discomfort, and what might have been reluctant pride. "I would like to thank my family for all their support and for teaching me the value of working the land." His voice grew steadier as he spoke. "Mrs. Eleanor Williams, who believed in me when I doubted myself. And also," he hesitated for a moment, then continued, "Principal Richard Thompson of Ridgeview Academy. Your demand for excellence pushed me to always strive for better." A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience, and several heads turned toward the principal, who looked utterly taken aback by the unexpected mention. The reporter, sensing a compelling story, quickly redirected her attention. "Principal Thompson, would you like to comment on your student's victory?" Cameras and microphones swung toward the principal, who visibly hesitated before stepping forward. As he neared the stage, Tyler could see he was genuinely moved, his usual stern expression replaced with something more vulnerable. "Tyler Anderson is a student with tremendous potential. He managed at last. Ridgeview Academy is proud of his achievement." The celebration continued for a while longer, with official photos, quick interviews, and countless congratulations. As the auditorium finally began to empty, Tyler found himself face to face with Mrs. Eleanor again, who was quietly speaking with Principal Thompson in a secluded corner. "Ah, there's our champion," she exclaimed upon seeing him, reaching out. "Richard and I were just talking about you." The principal seemed uncomfortable but not hostile. "Congratulations on your victory, Tyler," he said formally. "It was an impressive presentation." "Thank you, Principal." An awkward silence followed until Mrs. Eleanor gently intervened. "Richard, I believe you have something to say. To Tyler, don't you?" The principal adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and finally spoke in a quieter tone. "I must admit that I underestimated your potential, Tyler, and perhaps I was overly harsh in my judgments. It wasn't exactly an apology, but for a man as proud as Principal Richard, that admission was already a huge step. We all make mistakes, Principal, Tyler replied, feeling an odd compassion for the man who had intimidated him so much. What matters is learning from them. A glimmer of recognition flashed in the principal's eyes, as if those words had touched something deep within him. Indeed, he murmured more to himself than to the others. Then, in a firmer tone, well, I suppose we have much to discuss about your future at Ridgeview Academy. This award includes a scholarship, if I understand correctly. Yes, sir, for any educational institution of my choice. I hope you'll stay with us. And surprisingly, there was sincerity in his voice. Perhaps we could implement a special agricultural sciences program. Your experience would be invaluable. Tyler exchanged a meaningful glance with Mrs. Eleanor, who smiled serenely as if everything were unfolding exactly as she had planned. When the principal stepped away to gather the other students for the trip back, Tyler turned to Mrs. Eleanor. How did you know that I could achieve all this? She smiled, her eyes shining with genuine affection. Because I recognized in you the same spark I saw in Richard so many years ago. The difference is, you never forgot your roots, Tyler. You were never ashamed of who you are or where you came from. That authenticity is your greatest strength. Just then, Tyler's phone rang. It was his mother, eager for news. Mom, I won, I took first place, he exclaimed, barely containing his excitement. On the other end, he could hear joyful shouts and Sarah's emotional tears as she called for Frank at the top of her lungs to hear the news. When she finally calmed down enough to speak, she asked, How will you get home, son? Do you want us to try and come pick you up? Don't worry about that, Mrs. Eleanor interjected gently, stepping closer to the phone. This is Eleanor Williams, the private tutor Tyler told you about. I'd be happy to bring him home safely if you'll allow me. In fact, I'd very much like to meet you in person. We have some important matters to discuss about Tyler's project. After reassuring his concerned parents, it was settled that Mrs. Eleanor would drive Tyler back to the farm that same night. As they walked toward the limousine waiting at the exhibition center's entrance, he couldn't help but ask, What important matters do you want to discuss with my parents? Mrs. Eleanor smiled mysteriously. Let's just say your project has caught the attention of some key investors beyond the fair's judges. The Williams Institute is interested in expanding the pilot test to your entire farm, with potential implementation in other properties in the region. Tyler stopped abruptly, stunned. Does that mean that your family won't need to sell any part of your land? In fact, if all goes as planned, Sunrise Valley Farm could become a hub for sustainable technologies for small producers. Tyler's eyes filled with tears. It was more than he had ever dared to dream. Why are you doing all this for me? Mrs. Eleanor looked at him seriously, her usual lightness momentarily replaced by an almost tangible intensity. Because I recognize talent when I see it, Tyler. And because I believe people like you, who understand both the value of formal education and the practical knowledge of the land, are exactly what our country needs to face the challenges of the future. She smiled again, her expression softening. Besides, I'll admit I have a soft spot for stubborn kids who don't give up when things get tough. The following morning, as promised, Mrs. Eleanor's limousine stopped in front of the gates of Ridgeview Academy. Tyler stepped out, dressed in his usual clothes, but carrying the gleaming trophy from the fair. Beside him, Mrs. Eleanor walked, elegantly, ignoring the astonished looks of students arriving for class. News of his victory had already spread, thanks to a feature in the local paper and social media. Students who had never spoken to him before now approached, curious, wanting to see the trophy and ask questions about his project. In the main hallway, they encountered Principal Richard Thompson, who seemed to be deliberately waiting for them. His expression was solemn, but not hostile. Good morning, Tyler. Dr. Williams, he said, giving a slight nod of respect to Mrs. Eleanor, the deference clear in his voice. I'd like to speak with you both in my office, if possible. They followed him to the principal's office, where, to Tyler's surprise, Mrs. Catherine was already waiting, along with a few other teachers and the secretary, Margaret. First, the principal began once everyone was settled, I'd like to formally congratulate Tyler on his exceptional achievement. Ridgeview Academy has a new state science champion. A small round of applause filled the room, the teachers smiling genuinely. Secondly, he continued with visible effort, I owe an apology to you, Tyler, for not recognizing your potential, and worse, for discouraging you, and to you, Mrs. Catherine, for ignoring your recommendation about the project. A stunned silence filled the room. Principal Richard Thompson, known for his pride and inflexibility, publicly apologizing. As principal, my duty is to inspire and guide, not to demotivate, he said, choosing his words carefully. I failed in that regard, and I intend to correct that mistake. He then turned to Mrs. Eleanor, who observed the scene with a serene expression. Dr. Williams, your presence here today is no coincidence, I assume. You've always had a special talent for teaching important lessons in unexpected ways. A faint smile played on the older woman's lips. I only help reveal what's already inside each person, Richard, as I did with you, so many years ago. The principal nodded, a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. Well, I have an announcement to make. He straightened, reassuming his formal posture. Ridgeview Academy is launching a new program, the Center for Agricultural Sciences and Sustainability Studies, a space dedicated to bridging theory and practice, honoring our rural heritage, and developing accessible technologies for small and mid-sized producers. Surprised glances were exchanged among the teachers. It was a significant shift for a school, traditionally focused on college prep and urban careers. And I'd like to invite you, Tyler, the principal continued, to be our first student mentor. Your hands-on experience and talent for innovation will be invaluable. Tyler could hardly believe what he was hearing. From a ridiculed farm boy to the mentor of a special program, the transformation was almost surreal. And you, Dr. Williams, the principal turned to the older woman, would you accept being the program's honorary consultant? The Williams Institute is a national leader in sustainable agricultural research, and your guidance would be... He hesitated briefly. It would be an honor, just as it was a privilege to be your student. Mrs. Eleanor smiled, her eyes shining, with a mix of pride and nostalgia. It would be my pleasure, Richard. In fact, I was already planning something similar. The Institute is interested in forming partnerships with schools that value rural knowledge and promote sustainable solutions. She cast a meaningful glance at Tyler. And I believe Sunrise Valley Farm would be an excellent location for hands-on classes and field experiments. The implications of that proposal were enormous, not just for Tyler and his family, whose farm would gain new value and purpose, but for the entire academy and potentially for many other students from rural backgrounds who, like him, often felt out of place in traditional academic settings. In the months that followed, many changes took place. The irrigation system developed by Tyler was implemented across Sunrise Valley Farm, funded by the Williams Institute. The results exceeded expectations: a 62% reduction in water usage and a 28% increase in productivity for certain crops. The Center for Agricultural Sciences and Sustainability Studies at Ridgeview Academy quickly became a success, attracting eager students and receiving positive coverage from the local media. Regular visits to the Anderson family farm became part of the curriculum, with Frank and Sarah proudly sharing their hands-on knowledge with students and teachers. Principal Richard, surprisingly, became one of the program's most enthusiastic supporters. Gradually, his usual rigidity gave way to a more balanced and understanding approach, especially with students from rural or less privileged backgrounds. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, while supervising a group of students participating in a hands-on lesson at the farm, Tyler found Mrs. Eleanor watching the landscape from the porch of the main house. "You seem pleased," he remarked, joining. "Her. I am?" She smiled, her eyes sweeping over the lush fields that just months earlier had struggled against relentless drought. "I see the seeds we planted blooming in ways we never imagined." "Not just the plants," Tyler replied, gesturing toward the diverse group of students working eagerly in the field, including Brandon, who was now developing a solar energy project for the farm's water pumping systems. "Especially the people." Mrs. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "You know, Tyler, I learned long ago that true knowledge isn't just in books or just in hands-on experience, but in the harmonious union of the two. And people like you, who can move between these worlds, are essential bridges. On the horizon, rain clouds finally gathered after months of relentlessly blue skies. The drought was ending, both literally and figuratively. "I think we'll have a good harvest this year," Tyler remarked, looking at the promising sky. "Of many different kinds," Mrs. Eleanor agreed, resting a gentle hand on his shoulder. "And this is only the first of many." The end. Dear listener, has this story of perseverance touched your heart? If you've also faced prejudice or found someone who believed in your potential, share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories. Your companionship is our greatest treasure.